Hello again. Today we're going to talk about the suspension air compressor. This guide should work for any Range Rover Sport or LR3 model year 2005 through 2009. Issues with the air compressor will manifest similarly to many issues with the air suspension on these vehicles as the classic yellow suspension fault warning. There are two good ways to differentiate the air compressor as the cause as opposed to something else like a ride height sensor. First off, the fault will typically come on shortly after the vehicle is started. This is because the car is attempting to fill the air reservoir during this time and the compressor is extremely stressed. Second, if you're using an OBD2 scanner, you may see the code C1820. Pressure increases too slow when filling reservoir. This basically is stating that the compressor is worn and it's not filling the reservoir fast enough. Now, if you're on a budget, you're in luck. There exists a legend that the compressor has an Achilles heel that is easily fixed without having to buy a new compressor, potentially making this fix totally free. This lies in the fact that the compressor brings air through a desiccation chamber to dry the air before it is sent to the reservoir, and there is potential for this chamber to become clogged over time. Therefore, it's feasible to remove the chamber and mix up the desiccation beads, or replace the beads altogether, and attempt to replace the compressor afterwards to see if that fixes your issue. I have tried this with my compressor in the past, but I didn't have any luck. But I've heard of this working for others, so you may as well give it a try. This guide will show how to remove and replace the compressor, so if you want to try the desiccation trick, you can do it once the compressor is off the car. First things first, put the car in extended ride height, if you're able to. Next, if you have Rhino ramps, I would highly recommend backing the car up onto the Rhino ramps just to give you some extra working space. Once everything is in position, make sure to use a 13mm socket or a wrench and disconnect the battery. You don't want the car re-leveling or trying to compress when you're messing with the air suspension. Around here on the car is where the compressor is located. It's actually inside of a plastic sound dampening shell to eliminate some of the noise from the motor running. What you'll need to do is remove 3 bolts holding the bottom half of the housing using a 10mm socket or wrench. Once these are removed, undo the plastic snaps holding the cover in place and remove it. Start on one end and work your way to the other end. These can be pretty tough to remove, but once you're done, you can just remove the bottom half of the clamshell altogether. Here we finally get a look at the air compressor assembly. What you'll need to do to remove it is to unclip 2 electrical connectors, 3 4mm Allen bolts, and 3 high pressure air hoses. Looking at the bottom half of the clamshell, you can see there's a lot of sand and debris from driving on the beach and normal road driving. Just make sure to knock all that stuff out before you reinstall it. Somewhere along the line, it looks like I misplaced my 4mm Allen bolt, and so I'll need to replace this in the future. Now for possibly the hardest part of this job, accessing the top Allen bolt. You can either try to use an extremely low profile bit attached to a universal joint, or as in my case, rip the top part of the clamshell out to give you more space. You may damage some of the soundproofing in this process, but it is what it is. Here's a look at one of the bottom bolts, and then there's a bolt on top, up here. This one's the one that's difficult to reach if you don't take off the top of this clamshell. With the clamshell totally off, you have the ability to reach an entire hand up here with the Allen key and unscrew it. Next, undo the 2 electrical harnesses that are still connected to the compressor. The next step is to remove the high pressure air lines. To do this, you need to press down on the base while you pull out the hose. A word of warning is there may be some pressure retained in the line, and so it might pop when you pull it off. Finally, remove the 2 larger high pressure air lines attached to the rear of the compressor. Once everything's off, the compressor should come off of the body relatively easily. Here's a full look at the compressor and its attached air dryer. Now is a good time to take it apart and repair the air dryer if you want to go that route. Once you're ready to replace the compressor, put it back into the bracket and then attach the 3 Allen bolts. Once the Allen bolts are all attached, you can reattach the top half of the clamshell. It's going to be hard to put it back in its spot, just like it was difficult to take it out. Just keep wiggling it around and eventually it should fall into place. The next step is to make sure that you attach the 3 air hoses and the 2 electrical connectors. Make sure the air hoses are seated as deep as possible. Once everything is in place, just reattach the bottom half of the clamshell, redoing all of the plastic clips and then fastening the 3 bolts. You should not need to have the suspension calibrated after you complete the swap. Once you start the car back up, the yellow light may come on immediately. This is because the lines are empty and triggering the fault. Just turn the car off and wait a few minutes and then turn it back on. After a few times, you should hear the compressor kick in if everything went as planned. That's all for this guide. Please feel free to comment any questions that you may have. I'll be making more videos like this as repairs pop up in my car, so like and subscribe so you don't miss out.